What is a story? A story is a narrative, either real or imagined, that describes a series of connected events. Stories are used to communicate and build connection with people. Stories are an integral part of our culture. They are often used to educate, convey knowledge, describe historical events, and teach cultural values. Humans use stories to convey every and any thought or an idea in form of literature, performance, visual, or the primitive form of storytelling, which is verbal storytelling. Why storytelling? Stories are a great tool to educate and influence people. It helps us to understand different viewpoints. We seem to really like the characters that are relatable or characters which are extremely powerful. People either want to see someone alike to grow exponentially or to idealize someone who is already in position of power. Post-pandemic, there is a growing demand for stories of underdogs who rise and thrive against the odds. Recent blockbuster movies like Pushpa, KGF and Jawan are a good example of such stories. They share a common, heroic narrative. Stories are an integral part of our culture. Humans use stories to communicate even before the invention of languages. The cave paintings and the carvings we see. Stories are a powerful tool for embedding a sense of shared experience that bind people together. Every culture uses stories to impart traditional values, moral teachings, and cultural practices onto the younger generations. For example, Ramayana. There are different versions of this legend. It's part of various cultures across the globe. The basic key elements of a story are characters, setting, theme, plot, conflict, and resolution. Characters. The characters of the story could be people, animal, mythical creatures, or even objects. They come with their own unique personalities, motivations, and goals. A compelling story often features a protagonist, the main hero, facing an antagonist, the villain, or some kind of an obstacle. Setting refers to the time and place where the story takes place. It plays a significant role in forming narrative of the character about the fictional world created by the writer. Theme. It refers to the underlying message explored in the story. It is stated in such a way that the reader or the viewer can infer from the events and the characters of the story. Plot. It is a sequence of events that build up to the climax and ultimately lead to the resolution. It is a crucial element of a story as it provides structure and momentum for the progression of the narrative. Conflict. The central struggle or problem that the protagonist faces. It creates tension and drives the story forward. It plays a vital role in succession of the plot and characters' development. Resolution. It is an integral element of a story as it has an emotional impact on the reader or the viewer. It may either provide closure to the story or mark a beginning of a new conflict to continue the story, or either conclude the story with an open ending. Let's take an example of the movie Life of Pi. The primary setting of the story is in the Pacific Ocean, where Pi and few of his zoo animals manage to survive the shipwreck on a lifeboat, leaving them stranded in the middle of nowhere. The film explores the limits of human endurance, resilience on faith to survive the agony, and human-animal connection. The mutual dependence of Pi and Richard Parker reflects how humans and animals can develop a bond based on dependence. Pi struggles to survive against his internal fear, isolation, external force of nature, and the presence of the tiger on the lifeboat. Resolution. His ability to adapt the changing circumstances and finding solution to them. It involves training Richard Parker to coexist with him on the lifeboat. In order to separate himself from the internal menace, he draws strength from his faith in God by praying regularly. Story structures. Story structures are the blueprints for crafting a story. They provide a framework for organizing the events of the plot and develop the narratives. A classic story structure, which is popularly used in filmmaking, Hero's Journey. It focuses on both external adventure and internal transformation of the protagonist. The structure can be further simplified into three segments: departure, initiation, and return. Departure. It involves the introduction of the character, the setting of the world, and the main conflict of the story. Initiation. It is a significant part of the story where the protagonist meets new characters, forms new bonds, and gains new experiences. He also begins preparing for the conflict, which conduces for a significant transformation of the character both physically and emotionally. Return. The protagonist resolves the conflict and returns to his old life with his newfound understanding and new experiences. Some popular movies which follow this story structure are Lord of the Rings and The Matrix. 3-act structure. A narrative is broken down into 3 acts: setup, confrontation, and resolution. Setup. Introduction of the characters and the setting of the world. Then a catalytic event is introduced. The protagonist takes a necessary action against it but fails. Confrontation. Protagonist learns to adapt to the new surroundings. Difficulties occurs in order to complete the mission, which leads to the change of the narrative. Resolution. Protagonist faces the antagonist. At the end of the infeasible battle, protagonist wins and concludes the story with the establishment of peace back in the chaotic world. Example: Shawshank Redemption. 7-point story structure. The story structure allows the writer to effectively break down the plot into 7 key points. It mainly focuses on building tension at the key points, which contributes in maintaining maximum engagement. The structure can be further simplified into 3 parts: introduction, progression, and resolution. Introduction. Introduction to the characters and setting of the world, and transition towards the conflict of the world. Progression. It involves the introduction of the plot and initiates the development of the protagonist. The story structure has a unique element to it, which are the pinch points. They're used to introduce twists or new narratives to the story. Resolution. This is the conclusion of the story where the loose ends are tied up and the conflict is resolved. This is the underlying message or the idea that the story conveys. It can be moral, social commentary, or personal reflection. Example of a movie which follows the story structure is Rocky. Dan Harmon's Circle. Here, the story structure is divided into 8 parts that follows the protagonist's journey. It is a simplified version of hero's journey. Movies that can be analyzed using this structure are Inception and Toy Story. The key differences between Dan Harmon's Circle and Hero's Journey. Hero's Journey focuses primarily on the adventure or the quest of the protagonist, whereas Dan Harmon's Circle offers a more concise and flexible approach. It focuses on the protagonist's emotional journey rather than the specific plot points. How do businesses use storytelling? Businesses use storytelling as a marketing tool to forge a deeper connection with their consumers. Companies use storytelling in many ways, like influencer partnerships, social media posts, blogs, and advertisements to create engaging and memorable experiences. By sharing real-life stories, brands can build trust, and based on this trust, they can try to boost their sales. For example, Apple. They use cohesive storytelling. They explain how they're not just a brand or a company that makes gadgets. Instead, they emphasize on the fact that how they're inventors and innovators. They always compare their new generation products with the previous ones to show how better they are, and in fact, they have the best product in that category. The narrative is set in such a way that every forthcoming announcement that they make, they keep the audiences engaged. Apple always emphasizes on providing the best quality products. They're also famous for prioritizing their customers' privacy. They advertise Apple as the future of technology, some of which is also true because after every announcement that they make, they set a certain benchmark for the particular product in its category. Now, if advertising not done right can be disastrous. For example, this time with the advertisement of the Apple iPad Pro, where it received a lot of backlash on the internet. The advertisement particularly targeted the creatives. It basically wanted to portray the power of the M4 chip and how it can reduce a lot of tools into a single device, but it miserably failed to do so, and hence, ironically, upsetted a lot of creative people on the internet, and ultimately it had a negative impact. Nike. Nike heavily focuses on building connection through emotions. They feature athletes and their stories, the journey which involves various struggles and setbacks. Nike cleverly integrates their products in their advertisement where the athlete is improving gradually up until the point where they achieve their goal. They use a story structure to build this narrative which is called Hero's Journey. They masterfully create a subconscious connection with the audience by using this technique of storytelling. Now, both of these companies use storytelling to market their products, but Apple primarily focuses on selling their product by building a whole narrative around their product, whereas Nike does it a bit differently. They integrate their product in such a way that it becomes the part of the journey. Apple earns loyalty by design and exclusivity, whereas Nike does it by creating a whole perception around athleticism and aspiration. To stand out, you need to have a different approach which comes with experimentation and exploration of new ideas. In a saturated market of supposedly creative people, bringing a fresh piece of content will mostly be appreciated. If you're struggling to start with, then take the help of this Venn diagram. List your interests and skills in each of the sets and focus on the topics which lie on the intersection of it. It's a very basic way to approach this problem, but it can be very helpful in eliminating confusion and providing better clarity. Now, as of for writing, one of the easiest way to stand out is to have a very unique or more imaginary setting of the world, and then building characters and a whole plot around it. For example, movies like Harry Potter, Matrix, and Terminator. Another effortless way to do this is to create a character or a story based on relatability, because relatable characters portrayed as protagonists, whether they're fighting to rise or navigate life at the top or are already extremely powerful. They resonate with the transformation and growth of the character to believe, to have hope in themselves, or to idealize a hero and admire to become like one. Or using a layered story structure. It is a complex form of story structure, a very risky form to experiment with, can be excellent thought-provoking concept, and if embraced by people, then a great tool to captivate the viewers or the reader's attention. To craft a story, you don't really have to follow a predefined structure. These structures can be used for reference to overcome the writer's block. Now, this is just a broad overview on the uses of the story structure. Apart from the story and its elements, when it comes to visual storytelling, specifically for filming, to create a truly magical experience, and there needs to be a perfect synergy between SFX and VFX, where both work together to enhance the emotional core of the story. This enhances the impact of the story and leaving a lasting impression on the viewer's memory. And lastly, study great stories and then go find some of your own. Your stories will get better the more you tell them.